Now in Introduction to Communication, we're going to talk about some of the things we find in Chapter 2, which are considered basically the models of communication. A lot of times those models of communication are going to be quite simple, quite complex, but it's what we did to start out to understand how to evaluate communication. The first one by Schramm has basically two people. One person sends a message. Now what we do to send a message, we have to encode it or put it into a code. In this case, I'm putting it into English. So I'm communicating or encoding this into English for you. That message goes to you, you receive it. You have to decode it, you have to understand what I'm saying. So that's the decoding part. So you would then encode it and send it back to me. So we see this sort of cycle of information. Adding to that, Berlow said, not only is there a source and a receiver, an encoder and a decoder, giving some message, but we also have this channel. How are they saying this? What channel? Is it written? Is it visual? Is it communication? So we're adding some complexity. Adding to that very recently after that was McCroskey, where he added feedback primarily. In other words, it's not just me sending a message, not source, message, channel, receiver. It's not directly from one to the other. But we do have all that, plus I'm giving feedback. That feedback is not that cyclical message as you had before. It is something that I can see immediately, whether you understand it, like it, don't like it, or confused. Those types of things are the feedback. We also have noise in this channel. Noise is considered anything that interferes with the message. Anything that interferes with the message. That can be external noise, the rattle, the crinkle, my chair squeaking, or it could be the internal noise, the psychological noise. You're thinking about other things, getting confused, daydreaming, tiredness. So that adds some complexity to all of this. And according to McCroskey, it adds a lot of complexity because he says there is noise in each of these, in the source, in the message, in the channel, and the receiver, as well as the feedback. So noise is everywhere. There's something that can interfere with the message. Reusch and Bateson decided to go a little more complex, looking at not only who's communicating, but what we can do with that. So you see at the very bottom we have intrapersonal communication. That's that internal dialogue you have with yourself, that internal dialogue you have. Now, a lot of communication scholars have not studied this. However, psychology has studied this, and it does go into this internal dialogue we have. But moving up, we see interpersonal, one of the areas that we do have a lot of research on. Interpersonal communication, two people, a dyad, so we call it dyadic communication. Group communication is 3 or more people. Usually a small group is considered something like 20 or less, 15 or less, according to some definitions. Then at the highest level, we have intercultural. We're looking at entire groups of people. We're looking at entire groups of people, the whole culture. And at each of these, you see the list off to the right there about evaluation, message, channel, and receiving. Those are the different things we can look at or examine on each of these levels. The evaluation is we're evaluating the speaker as well as the receiver. We have to know who is talking, examine them, who is receiving, examine them. We look at the message itself, which is something we can do, as well as the channel. What channel is it given on? And then the receiving, how is it understood? How are people interpreting it? This type of evaluation can go on at each of those different levels. Even though it may seem like the same message, it may change depending on the level, and those things we can examine. When mass media came into play, we started looking at how does this work? How does this change our understanding of communication? How can we understand this different type of communication? Wesley McLean started this model, and it's oversimplified here, but let me make sure you understand these steps before we look at a fuller model. The events happen. All kinds of things happen during your day. Let's say you go to the bar last night. What happened? Well, what are you going to pass on to your friends? So you were the observer of everything that happened. How much do you tell your friend, the receiver? Not everything. You might have talked about who was waiting on you, the person you met or wanted to meet, the fight that came out, but not everything goes on. And you're saying, well, yeah, I tweet everything. Well, not everything. More complexly here, let's look at this. X is all the events that happen, everything that's happening. A, let's say, is a reporter, someone who's observing these events. The reporter sees the events, passes on a written aspect, a video, news story, different little news packages, passes on to C, who could be the editor, the content editor for the newspaper, the blog, the magazine. They don't print everything. They choose a few things and pass on to you, the reader, the viewer. And each of these see little dotted lines for F, feedback. So I can give feedback to the one person or the other. but not everything is passed on. And a lot of times it's a gatekeeper who gatekeeps something else. We have different aspects of how much actually gets passed on. And even today, when we have a lot of people blogging and tweeting and doing a lot of passing on of information from what would be considered a citizen journalist in that sense, not everything is passed on anyway. A lot more maybe, since we have everybody who could be passing things on as opposed to just the reporter. But not everything gets passed on. We decide as a gatekeeper, each of us in many ways is a gatekeeper, deciding what gets passed on and what doesn't. So depending on our model of communication, whether it's simple, linear, talking about groups, or talking about the media, we're still dealing with how we understand communication. Depending on the model we choose, makes a difference in how we look at communication, how we understand it. And the way we look at it, the way we understand it, helps us to be a better communicator in a particular way, depending on the model we approach it with. So those are the basic models to help us understand what's going on with communication right now.